You're listening to the sound of a quiet night. It's just past 1 in the morning here, and the city outside this window has gone soft. There's a street light on the corner that's been flickering for about 10 minutes now, just enough to throw a little tremor of amber across the glass, and I've been watching it the way you watch a candle. Not really watching, just letting it be there, letting it do what it does. The roads are empty. There's a cab somewhere, a few blocks south. I can hear it, barely, the tires on wet pavement, that soft hiss. And then it's gone, and it's just me and the microphone and the hum of the transmitter and whatever's left of the night between us. I hope you're comfortable. I hope the pillow's right. I hope the blanket's pulled up to where it needs to be, and the room is dim, and the house is still, and there's nothing left to do tonight except this. Just lie there and listen if you want, or drift off if you're ready. Either way, I'll be here. I'm not going anywhere. I've been sitting here for the last little while thinking about a town. Not a real town. Not one you could find on a map exactly. Though I suppose if you looked hard enough you'd find a dozen of them. Maybe 100 scattered across the middle of the country like seeds someone dropped from a pocket. Small towns. The kind with one main street and 2 stoplights if you were lucky, and a water tower with the town name painted on it in letters that were always just a little bit faded, always just a little bit behind on their last coat of paint. I was a boy there, or near there, or passing through. It doesn't matter exactly. What matters is the store. There was a general store. And I know that phrase might not mean much anymore. General store. It sounds like something from a book, something with an illustration on the cover, a porch and a rocking chair, and maybe a dog sleeping on the steps. And maybe that's not wrong. Maybe that's close. But the real thing, the one I'm remembering tonight, was more than that and less than that at the same time. It was just a building, a wooden building on the main street of a small town, set between a barber shop and an insurance office, with a screen door that didn't quite close all the way, and a wooden sign that hung from 2 chains above the porch. The sign? I can see the sign right now. It had the name of the store on it, the family name, and then underneath in smaller letters it said dry goods, sundries, feed. And the paint on that sign was thick, the way paint gets when it's been done and redone, layer over layer, year over year, so the letters had a kind of softness to them, a kind of roundness, like they'd been worn smooth by weather and time, the way a river stone gets worn smooth by water. And the sign would move, just barely. On a day with any breeze at all, those 2 chains would let the sign sway, just a 1/4 inch this way, a 1/4 inch that way, and the chains would make a sound, a small sound. A creak that was so faint you almost couldn't hear it. But once you did, once you noticed it, it became part of the place. It became the sound the store made. That tiny rhythmic creak, like the building was breathing. I used to walk past that store in the afternoon. The afternoon was the time. Not the morning, when the store had a busier kind of energy, people coming in with lists, people with things to do. And not the evening, when it closed up and went dark and became just another shape on the street. The afternoon. Somewhere between 2 and 4 o'clock, when the sun had crossed over the peak of the roof and started to lean westward, and the light came in at an angle through those front windows and turned everything inside to gold. That light. I need to talk about that light, because that light is the first thing I remember when I think about that store. Before the smell, before the sound, before any of it. That afternoon light coming through windows that hadn't been washed in a while. Not dirty, just softened. Just hazed over with a thin film of dust and time. So the light that came through wasn't sharp. It wasn't the kind of light that makes you squint. It was the kind of light that makes you slow down. Amber light. Warm light. Light that looked the way honey tastes, thick and golden and slow. And it fell across the floor in long rectangles, those window-shaped patches of gold laid out across the wooden planks like someone had unrolled a carpet made of nothing but warmth. And the dust, there was always dust in that light. Not dirty dust. Not the kind of dust that means someone hasn't been cleaning. Just the kind of dust that lives in old buildings, the kind that floats, the kind that only shows itself when the light is right, when the angle catches it, and then suddenly the air is full of these tiny, slow-moving sparks, drifting, taking their time, in no hurry to land. I would stand on the sidewalk and look in through those windows, and the whole interior of the store would glow. That's the only word for it. Glow. Like the building had swallowed the afternoon sun and was holding it inside, letting it out slowly, letting it warm the jars and the barrels and the shelves and the floorboards and the ceiling and the air itself, until everything in there was the same temperature. The same color, the same slow golden stillness. And the stillness is the thing I want you to feel right now, not silence. It wasn't silent in there. There were small sounds I'll get to later. Sounds that belong to the store the way a heartbeat belongs to a chest. But the stillness was something else. It was the feeling of a place that had nowhere to be. A place that had been standing on that street for so long that it had stopped counting the years and had just settled into being there. The way a stone settles into a hillside, the way a tree settles into soil, slowly and completely, and without any intention of moving. That stillness lived in the light. It lived in the way the dust moved through the gold, so slowly, each tiny mote following its own invisible current, rising and falling and turning in the warmth. And if you watched one, if you picked one piece of dust and followed it with your eyes, you could watch it drift for a long time, a very long time, before it finally found a surface to rest on, a shelf edge or a jar lid or the broad dark surface of the counter. And even then, even after it landed, you could almost feel it thinking about rising again, about catching the next small breath of air and lifting off and going back to its slow, golden wandering. The floor. Let me stay with the floor for a moment. The floor of that store was made of wide wooden planks, and they were old. They were the kind of old that you could feel through the soles of your shoes if you ever stepped inside, which I did once or twice, though mostly I watched from outside. Those planks had been walked on for decades. They had grooves in them, shallow valleys worn smooth by the passage of boots and shoes and bare feet in summer, and the wood had darkened over the years to the color of molasses, a deep, rich brown that was almost black in the corners where the light didn't reach and almost gold where the afternoon sun hit it straight on. And those planks had gaps between them. Not wide gaps, just the kind of gaps that happen when wood ages and shrinks, hairline spaces between one board and the next. And if you were a boy standing near the door and the light was right, you could see down into those gaps, just barely, into a darkness that seemed to go on forever. A cool, earthy darkness that smelled like the underside of the building, like damp soil and old stone, and the ghost of every season that had ever passed beneath that floor. The smell. Now I'm getting to the smell. Because the smell of that general store in the afternoon was not one smell. It was a dozen smells, layered on top of each other, woven into each other, so tangled together that you couldn't pull them apart if you tried. But I'll try. I'll try tonight, because I've got nothing but time, and the night is long, and some things are worth trying to untangle, even if you never quite get there. The first thing you smelled, the thing that hit you before you even got to the door, the thing that lived on the porch and drifted out through that screen door that never quite closed, was wood. Old wood. Not fresh-cut lumber, not sawdust, not anything sharp or new. This was the smell of wood that had been a building for 50 years. Wood that had absorbed decades of weather and tobacco smoke and kerosene and lemon oil and sweat and rain, and the faint, sweet ghost of every apple that had ever sat in a barrel near the front. Wood that had its own smell now, separate from any other thing. A smell that was warm and dry and slightly sweet, like the memory of a tree that had long since forgotten it was ever a tree. And under the wood, or maybe through the wood, woven into it, there was the smell of grain. Because somewhere toward the back of that store, past the counter, past the shelves of canned goods and the rack of seed packets and the glass case where the penny candy was kept, there were bins of grain. Feed corn and oats and barley, stored in wooden bins with hinged lids, and the smell of that grain was a living smell, a dry and golden smell, a smell that had weight and texture, a smell you could almost hold in your hand. And mixed with the grain there was something else, something softer, something that took a moment to find, like a voice in the back of a room that you have to be quiet to hear. It was the smell of cloth. Bolts of fabric stacked on a shelf behind the counter, cotton and muslin and calico, rolled tight and standing on their ends like sentries, and each one gave off a faint smell that was somewhere between starch and cotton, and the particular warmth of a thing that has been sitting in the same spot, in the same store, in the same patch of afternoon light for a long, long time. A patient smell, a still smell, a smell that was in no hurry to go anywhere, because why would it be? It had found its shelf. It had found its place in the golden air. It was content to just be what it was, slowly, for as long as the afternoon lasted. And there were other smells, too. Fainter ones. The smell of leather from a few pairs of work gloves that had hung from a peg near the door, stiff and brown and creased at the knuckles even though no one had ever worn them. The smell of soap. Real soap. Bar soap. Wrapped in paper and stacked in a small cardboard box near the register, and the scent of that soap was clean and plain and honest. A smell without any pretense. The kind of clean that just means clean and nothing more. And somewhere beneath all of it, beneath the wood and the grain and the cloth and the leather and the soap, there was the smell of time itself. If time has a smell, and I believe it does. It smells like old paper and warm dust and the inside of a drawer that hasn't been opened in years, and it is not an unpleasant smell. It is the smell of a place that has been itself for a very long time, and is not sorry about it. I would stand on that sidewalk in the afternoon, and the smell would come to me through the screen door like a visitor, like something that had decided to step outside and see who was passing by, and I would breathe it in. I would breathe it in slowly, the way you breathe in something you want to remember. Something you know even then you're going to carry with you for a long time, though you couldn't have told me why. I was a boy. I didn't know why I liked the smell. I just knew I did. I knew it made me want to stay. The screen door. I should tell you about the screen door, because the screen door was a thing unto itself. It was wooden framed, with that diamond pattern wire mesh that used to be on every screen door in every small town in the country, and the wood was painted white, though the white had gone grey in places, and the screen had a small tear near the bottom corner that someone had patched with a piece of wire bent into a little spiral, a repair so old it had become part of the design. And that door had a spring. A long, coiled spring that ran from the door frame to the door itself, and the whole purpose of that spring was to pull the door shut after you. But it didn't do it quickly. It didn't snap the door closed. It eased it closed, slowly, with a long, rising creak that started low and ended high, like a note being played on an instrument that only screen doors know how to play. And then, just at the end, when the door was almost but not quite closed, there was a pause. A half-second of silence, and then the soft, wooden clap of the door meeting the frame, and then a smaller sound, a rattle, as the screen vibrated in its housing for just a moment before going still. That sound, that three-part sound, the creak, the clap, the rattle. I heard it every time someone went in or came out, and in the afternoon when the store was quiet, and the street was quiet, and the whole town seemed to be moving at half speed in the heat. That sound carried. It carried all the way to where I stood on the sidewalk, and it was the sound of a place that was open, that was alive, that was waiting for whoever needed it. And between the times when someone came or went, the door would rest. Almost closed, not quite latched. And through the gap, that narrow gap between the door and the frame, a thin line of cool, dark air would slip out from inside the store, carrying with it all those smells I was telling you about, the wood and the grain and the cloth, and the other ones I haven't gotten to yet, the ones that lived deeper inside, the ones you had to step through the door to really know. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm still on the porch. I'm still on the sidewalk, really. Still standing there in the afternoon, still watching the light do what it does inside that store, still breathing in what comes to me through the screen. The porch. The porch was not wide, maybe 6 feet from the front wall of the store to the edge where the steps went down to the sidewalk. And it was covered, a little roof of its own that was just an extension of the main roof, held up by 2 wooden posts that had been painted and repainted so many times they were smooth as bone. And on that porch there were things. There were always things on the porch of that store. Things that lived outside because they were too big or too dusty or too much themselves to live inside. There was a barrel, a wooden barrel, the kind with metal bands around it, and it sat near the door on the left side, and sometimes it had apples in it, and sometimes it had potatoes, and sometimes it was empty and just sat there being a barrel, which was enough. The wood of that barrel was grey with weather, a silver grey that you only get from years of sun and rain, and sun again, and the metal bands were rusted to a colour that was almost orange, almost brown, a colour that didn't have a name, but that you'd recognise the moment you saw it because it was the colour of everything old and iron and left outside. And there was a bench, a wooden bench pushed up against the front wall of the store, under the window, and the bench was for sitting, though I don't remember ever sitting on it. Other people sat on it. Older men, mostly. Men who had finished whatever they had to finish for the day and had come to the store not to buy anything, but just to be there, just to sit on that bench in the shade of the porch roof and watch the afternoon go by at whatever speed the afternoon chose to go by at. They would sit there, and sometimes they talked and sometimes they didn't. Sometimes they just sat, and the bench held them the way a bench does, without comment, without judgment, just a flat surface and a wall to lean against, and the shade and the sound of the screen door and the smell of the store drifting out to keep them company. The wood of that bench was smooth. Smooth the way only a thing that has been sat on for years can be smooth, rubbed to a polish by the backs of trousers and the palms of hands, a dark, warm sheen that caught the afternoon light and held it. And if you ran your hand along the seat of that bench, you could feel the grain of the wood through the smoothness, like a river running beneath ice, the texture still there but softened, gentled, made quiet by time. I'm looking at that bench right now in my mind, and I can see the shadow of the porch roof falling across it, a clean diagonal line of shade that moved as the afternoon moved, slowly. So slowly, you could never catch it moving. But if you looked away and looked back, it shifted. It had crept an inch further along the bench, claiming a little more of the seat for the cool and the dark, and the sidewalk in front of the store. The sidewalk was concrete, but it was old concrete, cracked in places, and in the cracks there was grass. Thin, brave blades of grass that had found their way up through the concrete and into the light, and they were the brightest green things on the block. Those little blades, bright against the grey of the sidewalk and the brown of the street and the white of the porch posts, small and ordinary and alive. There's a record I should probably play for you. Something slow. Something that knows what time it is. But I think I'll just let the quiet sit for a moment. The night is long. The city is still. And that store is still there, in the back of my mind, glowing in the afternoon light, the screen door almost closed, the dust drifting in the gold air, the smell of old wood and grain coming through. We'll go back. We'll step a little closer next time. But for now, just let that image rest. The porch, the barrel, the bench, the light through the windows, the little creak of the sign on its chains. It's all still there. And so are you, and so am I. And the night has barely started. Still here. Still just me, and the microphone and the low hum of the transmitter, and the city doing what the city does at this hour, which is almost nothing. There's a light on in a building across the way. One window, maybe 4 floors up. And I've been watching it the way you watch a lighthouse from a long distance, not because you need it, but because it's there. Because someone else is awake. And there's a kind of company in that. A quiet company. The kind that doesn't need a conversation. I hope you're still comfortable. I hope the sheets are cool where they need to be cool and warm where they need to be warm. And the pillow has found the shape of you by now. The way a good pillow does. Slowly, settling in like it's been waiting all day for this, for you, for the weight of your head and the letting go of everything else. We were at the store. We were standing on the sidewalk, you and I, in the afternoon, and the light was coming through the front windows and turning everything inside to gold. And the smell was drifting out through the screen door, and the sign was creaking on its chains. Just barely, just sound that was the store's way of saying it was there. Let's step a little closer. Let's step up onto that porch. The step, there was 1 step, sometimes 2, from the sidewalk up to the porch. And the wood of that step was worn in the center, worn down to a shallow curve, a dip, a valley made by years of feet. And the grain of the wood was exposed there in a way it wasn't anywhere else. The hard grain standing up in tiny ridges because the softer wood between had been worn away. And if you were barefoot, if it was summer and you were barefoot, the way boys were barefoot in those days, you could feel those ridges under your feet, like the strings of some instrument buried in the wood. A texture so fine, so particular, that your feet remembered it even when the rest of you forgot. And now you're on the porch. And the shade is different here. Out on the sidewalk, the sun was on you, the full weight of the afternoon sun pressing down on your shoulders and the top of your head like a warm hand. And now, under the porch roof, that weight lifts. The shade is not cool, exactly. It's too warm a day for that. But it's a different kind of warm. A softer warm. A warm that has had the brightness taken out of it. And what's left is just the heat without the glare, and your eyes relax, and the world goes a shade darker. A shade gentler. And you can see into the store more clearly now, because the glass of the windows isn't throwing the sun back at you anymore. And from here, from the porch, from this close, you can hear the store. Not the screen door, not the sign. Those are the sounds that belong to the outside of the store, the sounds the store sends out into the street. But from the porch, if you're still, if you just stand there and let the quiet settle around you like water settling in a glass, you can hear the sounds that live inside. The first one is the floor. The floor makes a sound whenever anyone moves, a creak, a groan, a long, slow complaint from the boards that is not really a complaint at all, but more of an acknowledgement, the way an old chair acknowledges you when you sit down, not protesting, just letting you know it felt you arrive. And that sound travels through the whole building. A step near the back of the store sends a creak all the way to the front, moving through the planks like a whisper moving through a crowd, getting softer as it goes but never quite disappearing, just fading into the next sound, the next small movement of wood against wood. And then there is the clock. There was always a clock in a store like that. Not a fancy clock. Not a grandfather clock with a pendulum and a case and chimes on the hour. Just a round clock on the wall behind the counter, a plain white face with black numbers and black hands. And it ticked. It ticked the way all clocks ticked before clocks stopped ticking, which is to say it ticked with its whole body. A small mechanical pulse that you could feel in the wall it hung on if you put your hand there. A vibration so faint it was almost imaginary. But the sound was real. A steady, patient, unhurried tick that didn't care whether you were listening or not. It had been ticking since someone wound it that morning, and it would go on ticking until someone wound it again. And in between, it just did what it did, measuring out the afternoon in small, even portions, each one exactly the same as the one before, each one exactly the same as the one after. And the thing about that tick, the thing I want you to hear right now, lying there in the dark, is that it didn't make the time go faster. It didn't make you aware of the time passing. It did the opposite. It made the time feel held. It made the afternoon feel contained, kept, like the clock was not counting the minutes but holding them, one by one, keeping them safe in its slow rhythm. And the store moved to that rhythm the way a sleeping person moves to the rhythm of their own breathing, slowly, gently, without thinking about it. And if you listened long enough, and in the afternoon there was always long enough, the tick became something you stopped hearing. Not because it stopped, but because it became part of you, part of the room, part of the air. The way your own heartbeat becomes something you stop noticing until someone asks you to listen for it. And then you'd hear it again, fresh, as if for the first time, and you'd realize it had been there all along, faithful, patient, keeping the afternoon in order while everything else drifted. The face of that clock was simple, white like I said, and the numbers were plain, and the hands were black, and there was a second hand, thin, red, the only red thing on that wall. And it moved in that way second hands move, not smoothly, not gliding, but stepping, one small jump at a time, each jump the same distance, each one arriving at its mark and pausing, arriving and pausing, a tiny mechanical heartbeat visible from across the room. And if you watched it long enough, your own breathing would slow to meet it. Your own pulse would quiet, and the afternoon would hold you the way it held everything else in that store, gently, without effort, without asking. Tick, and a creak from the floor somewhere near the middle of the store. Tick, and the faint sound of paper, a page turning, maybe a newspaper being folded on the counter. Tick. And the screen door, far away now, that three-part sound, the creak, the clap, the rattle. As someone comes in or goes out, it doesn't matter which. It's the same sound either way. The same slow announcement that the world outside and the world inside have touched for a moment and then separated again. And between the ticks and the creaks and the sound of the door, there is something else. There is the sound of jars, glass jars. Because behind the counter, on the shelves that lined the wall from the floor almost to the ceiling, there were jars, dozens of jars. Glass jars with metal lids, and some of them were clear, and some of them were brown, and some of them were green. And they held things, nails and screws and buttons and pins and hard candies and peppermints and licorice whips and lemon drops and horehound drops. And things I couldn't identify from where I stood, things that were just shapes and colors behind curved glass. And when someone reached for one of those jars, when a hand went up to a shelf and found the jar it was looking for and brought it down, the other jars on the shelf would shift, just barely, settling into the space the missing jar had left, and they would make a sound. A small, glassy sound. A clink, almost, but softer than a clink. More like a whisper between jars. A brief conversation about the one that had left and when it might come back. And the lid of the jar coming off. That was a sound, too. A metal lid being unscrewed from a glass jar, the threads catching and releasing, a tiny gritty sound, and then the lid was free. And there was a moment, just a moment, when you could smell whatever was in that jar from across the room. A sudden breath of peppermint or camphor, or the dusty sweet smell of penny candy, released into the golden air like a small secret that had been kept too long. The penny candy. I want to stay here for a while. I want to stay at the candy case, because the candy case was the center of the world when you were small. It was a glass case, not a jar, not a shelf, a case. A glass-topped wooden case that sat on the counter, or maybe next to the counter, and it had a slanted glass front so you could look down into it, and inside, arranged in compartments, little wooden dividers separating one kind from another, were the candies, and they were not wrapped, that's the thing. They were not wrapped in cellophane or sealed in bags or hidden behind packaging. They were just there, lying in their compartments, open to the air, open to the eye, dozens of small, bright, unwrapped pieces of candy sitting on sheets of waxed paper that had gone translucent with age and sugar. And the colors. The colors in that case were the brightest things in the store. brighter than the fabric bolts, brighter than the seed packets, brighter than anything on the shelves, because everything else in the store had been softened by time and dust and the amber light. But the candy was new. The candy was always being replenished, always bright, always shining. Red fireballs and green lime drops and yellow lemon drops and orange slices coated in coarse sugar that caught the light like tiny crystals, and root beer barrels the color of dark honey, and peppermint sticks striped red and white in perfect spirals, and licorice, long black ropes of licorice coiled in their compartment like sleeping snakes, and butterscotch discs the color of the afternoon light itself, as if someone had poured the sun through the window and let it harden into something you could hold on your tongue. And the waxed paper they sat on. The waxed paper had a smell too, a faint, waxy, slightly sweet smell that was the smell of anticipation, the smell of the moment before you chose. The smell of standing there with your nose just above the glass, your breath fogging the surface, your eyes moving from one compartment to the next, trying to decide. And the deciding was almost as good as the having, because the deciding meant you were still in the middle of it, still surrounded by all of it, all the colors and all the smells and all the possibility. And the glass of that case was thick, old glass. The kind that had a faint green tint to it if you looked at it from the side, and it was cool to the touch even in the warm store, even in the warm afternoon. And if you rested your fingertips on it, you could feel the coolness of it travel into your hand, a small relief, a small gift from the glass, and your fingertips would leave prints there, small oval ghosts on the surface that faded slowly, slowly, the way breath fades from a window on a cold morning, until the glass was clear again, and the candies were bright and sharp beneath it, and the whole case looked like no one had ever touched it at all, though everyone had. A penny. That's what it cost. Some of them anyway. A penny for a fireball, a penny for 2 lemon drops, a penny for a root beer barrel. And a penny was a real thing then. A penny was a coin you could feel in your pocket, warm from your leg, and you would hold it in your hand and it would be damp from your palm, and you would put it on the counter and it would make a small flat sound against the wood. Not a ring. Pennies don't ring, they just land, with a soft copper thud. And the sound of that penny on the counter was the sound of a decision being made, a choice being final. And then a hand would reach into the case and bring out what you had chosen and set it on a small square of paper in front of you. And then the closing of the case. The glass lid easing back down and the small click of it settling into place, and the candies behind the glass again, safe, waiting for the next penny, the next decision, the next pair of eyes fogging the glass. I'm still on the porch, really. I told you I was going to step closer, and I have, but only in my mind. I'm still standing just outside the screen door, looking in, and the candy case is there across the room, glowing in the afternoon light, and the clock is ticking, and the floor is creaking somewhere, and the jars are whispering on their shelves. But let me tell you about the counter. Because the counter was the heart of that store, the way a kitchen table is the heart of a house. Everything happened at the counter, everything passed across it. And the counter itself, the wood of it, the surface of it, was a record of all that passing. It was wide, wider than you'd think, maybe 3 feet deep, maybe more, and it ran across the middle of the store like a board between 2 countries, the country of the customer on one side and the country of the shopkeeper on the other. And the wood was thick and dark and smooth, smoother than the floor, smoother than the bench on the porch, because the counter was touched all day long, every day. Hands resting on it, elbows leaning on it, coins sliding across it, paper bags being filled and folded on it, and all that contact had polished the wood to a finish that no varnish could match. There were grooves in the counter. Not deep grooves, shallow ones, the kind you had to look for to see. Places where a knife had been used to cut twine, small nicks and scores and scratches that had been worn smooth by the years but never quite erased. And they were like lines on a palm. like the record of a life lived in small daily motions, the same motions repeated 1,000 times until they wore themselves into the wood and became permanent. And on the counter, near the register, there was a register, I should mention, a brass register with round keys that you pressed with your whole finger, not just the tip. And when you pressed one, it made a heavy, satisfying click, and the drawer came open with a bell, a small bright bell that rang once and then stopped, a sound so particular to that machine, and that moment that I can hear it right now, sitting here in this studio, 40 years and 1,000 miles away. Near the register, on the counter, there was a scale. A small brass scale, the kind with 2 pans on chains, balanced on a central point, and it was used for weighing things that came loose. Nails by the pound, flour by the bag, sugar by the scoop. And even when it wasn't being used, even when both pans were empty, the scale had a presence on the counter, a kind of quiet authority. The 2 pans hanging there in perfect balance, not moving, not tilting, just being still, being level, being exactly what they were, which was 2 empty pans waiting patiently to be of use. And the surface of those pans had a patina, a dull golden color that was not quite brass and not quite brown. A color that came from years of things being set on them and taken off. Flour dust and salt crystals, and the oil from hands and the tarnish of air. And if you looked closely, you could see faint rings on the pans, circular impressions from the bottoms of weights that had been placed there and removed, placed and removed over and over, each one leaving the smallest trace, the smallest record of a transaction that had mattered to someone for a moment and then was done. The light is falling across that counter right now in my memory, the afternoon light. It's catching the brass of the register and the brass of the scale and turning them to low fire. And the wood of the counter is dark and warm. And there's a pencil lying in the groove next to the register. There was always a pencil, short, sharpened with a knife, not a sharpener, so the point was uneven, a little rough. And the pencil is casting a thin shadow across the wood. A line of dark no wider than a thread, and even that shadow is warm because everything in that store in the afternoon was warm. I think I'll let that rest for a moment. The counter, the register, the scale, the pencil and its thread of shadow, the candy case glowing in the corner, the clock on the wall, ticking, holding the afternoon in its slow, steady hands. There's more. There's always more in a place like that. The shelves go deeper. The store goes back further than you think. And we haven't even talked about the man behind the counter, or the apron he wore, or the way he moved through that space like someone moving through his own living room, slowly, comfortably, knowing where everything was without having to look. But that's for later. That's for the next time we come back to this street, this porch, this door. For now, just hold the sound of that clock. Tick, and the creak of the floor, and the small, glassy whisper of the jars settling on their shelves, and the smell, the wood and the grain and the candy and the waxed paper and the warm brass and all of it mixed together into one thing, one smell, the smell of a place that is exactly where it's supposed to be. You're right where you're supposed to be too. The night goes on. The light in the window across the way is still there, and so am I. It's getting on toward 2 now. The city has gone another shade quieter, if that's possible, another shade deeper, into whatever it is that cities go into at this hour. There's no traffic now, not even a cab, just the sound of the building itself, the ventilation, the hum of the lights in the hallway outside the studio, the small ticking of things cooling and settling, the way buildings do at night, contracting in the dark, easing into themselves like old houses ease into their foundations when the day lets go. And somewhere out there, you're listening, or half listening, or just letting the sound of a voice be there in the room with you, the way a lamp is there, not demanding anything, just giving off a little warmth, a little light, enough to keep the dark from feeling empty. That's all this is. That's all it needs to be. We were in the store. We were at the counter, you and I, standing in the afternoon light with the clock ticking on the wall and the candy case glowing and the smell of everything, wood and grain and waxed paper and warm brass, filling the air like something you could lean against. And I told you there was a man behind that counter. And there was. There was always a man behind that counter. I didn't know his name. I must have heard it, must have known it at some point, the way you know the names of everyone in a small town, whether you mean to or not. But I've lost it now, and it doesn't matter. What I haven't lost is the rest of him. The shape of him. The way he stood. The way he moved through that store like water moves through a creek bed, following the path it has followed 1,000 times before, never hurrying, never wondering where to go next. He was not a large man. He was not a small man. He was the kind of man who was exactly the right size for the space he was in, as if the store had been built around him, or he had been built for the store. And over the years they had settled into each other so completely that you couldn't imagine one without the other. He stood behind that counter the way a tree stands in a yard, not because it chose to be there, but because that's where it grew. And now it's been there so long that the yard has shaped itself around it, and the shade falls where it falls, and everyone knows it, and no one questions it. He wore an apron, a long apron, the kind that ties behind the neck and again at the waist, and it was white. Or it had been white once, a long time ago, and now it was the color that white becomes when it has been washed 1,000 times and worn 1,000 more. Not grey, not yellow, not any color you could name, just a softened white, a tired white, a white that had done its duty and was still doing it without complaint. And the apron had pockets, 2 pockets in the front, and in one of them there was always a pencil, the same kind of short, knife-sharpened pencil that lay on the counter. And in the other there were things that shifted and clinked softly when he moved. Small things, a few nails maybe, a button or 2, a key to something. Things that had found their way into that pocket over the course of the day and would find their way out again before the day was done. Or maybe they wouldn't. Maybe they would stay there, gathering the way small things gather in the pockets of a man who works with his hands. And the cloth of that apron had a weight to it. Not a heaviness, a weight. The weight of fabric that has been washed in hot water and wrung out and hung on a line and dried in the sun so many times that it has become something other than what it started as, something softer, something thinner in places, something that drapes differently than new cloth drapes, that falls against the body in a way that is familiar and comfortable and specific to the person who wears it, as specific as a fingerprint. And when he moved behind the counter, the apron moved with him, a half-second behind, catching up, the hem swaying gently against his legs. And the motion of that fabric was so quiet and so constant that it became part of the rhythm of the store, part of the breathing of the place. One more slow thing moving slowly in the golden air. His sleeves were rolled. I remember that. His shirt sleeves were rolled to just below the elbow, 2 careful folds, and the forearms that showed were tan and corded with small muscles and dusted with fine hair that the light caught and turned to gold. And the skin of those forearms was the skin of a man who had carried things all his life, boxes and barrels and sacks of flour and grain, and the veins stood out. Not dramatically, just visibly, the way veins do on arms that have done a lifetime of quiet, steady work. His hands. His hands were the thing you noticed, if you noticed anything, because his hands were never still. Not restless. Never restless, they were just always doing something. Straightening a jar on the shelf, brushing a crumb from the counter, pulling a length of twine from the spool that hung on a hook near the register, and cutting it with a knife that came from somewhere beneath the counter and went back there just as smoothly. A motion so practiced it had no beginning and no end. Just the twine appearing, and the knife appearing, and the cut being made, and the knife disappearing, and the twine being wrapped around a package and tied with a knot that was tight and neat and done in a single motion. One hand holding the twine taut, while the other looped and pulled, and then the knot was finished, and the package was done, and his hands were already moving on to the next thing, whatever the next thing was. Because there was always a next thing in a store like that. Always something to straighten or wipe or measure or fold. And the packages he made. The packages he wrapped. I should tell you about those. Because the way that man wrapped a package was something to see, even if you didn't know you were seeing it. He would take a sheet of brown paper, brown craft paper, pulled from a wide roll that sat on a shelf beneath the counter, the roll turning on a wooden dowel as the paper was drawn out, making a low, rumbling sound, a sound like distant thunder heard through walls. And he would tear the paper against the metal edge of the counter, a quick, clean tear, and the sound of that tear was sharp and satisfying, the sound of something being made to the right size, and then the paper would lie flat on the counter, and whatever was being wrapped would be set in the center of it, and his hands would fold the paper up and over and around, tucking the corners the way you tuck a bedsheet, each fold clean and sure. And then the twine would come down from the spool, and the knife would appear, and the knot would be tied, and there it was. A package. A neat, brown, anonymous package with a knot on top, and it could have been anything inside. Anything at all. And the mystery of that, the simplicity of that, the plain brown dignity of a thing wrapped in paper and tied with string, that was something the world had in those days. A kind of ordinary care that didn't call attention to itself but was there in everything, in the way things were done, in the way things were handled, in the slowness and the sureness of hands that knew their work. The twine. Let me stay with the twine for a moment. The spool of twine hung from a hook on the ceiling, or near the ceiling. A large spool, a cone of rough brown twine that smelled like hemp and dust and the inside of a barn, and the twine came down from the spool through a small metal eye, a guide, and it hung there in a gentle curve, waiting to be pulled. And when it was pulled, when those hands reached for it and drew it down, the spool would turn slowly with a dry, whispering sound. The sound of fibers against the wooden core of the spool, and the twine would unspool in that unhurried way that twine has, resisting just enough to stay taut, giving just enough to come freely. And the length of it would be measured not with a ruler or a tape, but with the hands themselves. The man holding one end against the edge of the counter and drawing the twine out to arm's length, and that was the measure, that was the unit. 1 arm's length of twine, enough to wrap a package, enough to tie a bundle, enough for whatever was needed, and the fact that it was measured by the body and not by a number made it feel right in a way that numbers never quite feel right, made it feel human, made it feel like the store itself was alive and the twine was part of its body and the man was part of its body and the whole thing breathed together in the afternoon light. And the knife. The knife he used to cut the twine was small. A folding knife, the kind with a wooden handle that had gone dark with oil and use, and the blade was short and slightly curved, and so sharp that it went through the twine without pulling, without sawing, just a single clean motion, and then the knife folded back into itself and slipped beneath the counter or into the apron pocket, I could never tell which, and it was gone. And the cut end of the twine swung gently from the spool, back and forth, a small pendulum keeping its own time, slower than the clock, quieter than the clock, until it came to rest and hung still again, waiting. Behind the man, behind the counter, the shelves went back. And this is where the store changed. This is where the afternoon light, the golden light that filled the front of the store and made everything glow, began to thin. Not disappear. It didn't disappear. It just softened. The way a voice softens as it moves down a hallway, getting quieter, getting gentler, losing its edges, until by the time you were halfway back, the light was more shadow than light, more suggestion than statement, and the things on the shelves took on a different quality, a quieter quality, as if they were sleeping. The shelves were wooden, like everything else, and they ran from floor to almost ceiling, and they were deep, deep enough that items at the back of a shelf were hard to see, half hidden in the dimness, and you had the feeling that things had been sitting back there for a very long time, things that had been placed on those shelves years ago and had simply stayed, not forgotten exactly, just not needed, not reached for, content to sit in the cool, dark back of the shelf and gather a thin skin of dust and wait. And the dust back there was different from the dust in the front. The dust in the front was golden, lit up, dancing in the light, alive. The dust in the back was still. It didn't float, it didn't drift. It just lay where it had settled, on the tops of cans and the shoulders of bottles and the flat surfaces of boxes. A thin grey film that softened every edge and muted every colour and gave the back of the store a feeling of tremendous quiet. The kind of quiet you find in a library or a church or a room where someone has been sleeping for a long time. And the air was different too. The air in the front of the store was warm, warmed by the sun through the windows, warmed by the bodies of whoever came in and out, warmed by the day itself pressing against the glass. But the air in the back was cooler. Not cold. Nothing in that store was cold, but cooler. The way the air is cooler under a tree, the way the air is cooler when you walk from a sunlit yard into a shed. And the coolness had a texture almost, a density. The air back there felt thicker, heavier, closer, as if it had been sitting in that part of the store for so long that it had settled and compacted and become its own small climate, a pocket of stillness inside a building that was already still. Cans. There were cans back there. Tin cans with paper labels, and the labels were bright once. Red tomatoes, green beans, yellow corn. But the colours had faded in the ones that had been there longest, faded to softer versions of themselves. The red gone to a rose, the green gone to a sage, the yellow gone to the colour of old cream, and the paper had curled at the edges, just slightly, pulling away from the tin. And if you picked up one of those cans, if you reached back into the dim shelf and brought one forward into the light, it would feel cool in your hand, cooler than the air, as if it had been storing up the night in the back of that shelf and holding it there through the warm afternoon. And behind the cans, deeper still, there were boxes. Cardboard boxes, some of them open, some of them sealed, and they held things that were not on display, things that were waiting to be unpacked, or things that had been unpacked already, and the boxes kept, because you never throw away a good box, not in a store like that, not in a town like that. A good box was a useful thing. A good box could hold nails or receipts or seed packets, or the parts of something that had been taken apart and not yet put back together. And those boxes smelled like cardboard, which is a smell I haven't mentioned yet, and which deserves a moment of its own. Because cardboard has a smell that is as particular and unmistakable as any flower. It is dry. It is slightly dusty. It is the color brown translated into a scent, if that makes any sense. And it probably doesn't. But I'm going to say it anyway because it's 2 in the morning and I'm allowed. Cardboard and dust and the cool air that lived in the back of the store. That was the smell back there. Different from the front. Quieter. Deeper. The smell of storage, the smell of keeping, the smell of things put away, not because they were unwanted, but because they were being saved, held in reserve, kept safe against the day they would be needed. And the floor back there creaked differently. The floor in the front of the store had a warm creak, a settling sound, the sound of boards that were used to being walked on and didn't mind it. But the floor in the back had a higher creak, A thinner sound because fewer feet came back here and the boards were not as worn, not as settled. And when you stepped on them, they spoke up, surprised, as if to say, oh, someone's here. Someone's come to the back of the store. And the sound would carry forward through the building, through the shelves and the air and the golden light, all the way to the front, all the way to the counter, where the man in the apron would hear it and know without looking exactly where in the store you were, because he knew every creak, every board, the way a musician knows every note on an instrument, the way a mother knows every sound her house makes in the night. There was a window in the back, a small window, not like the front windows with their wide panes and their golden light. This was a single pane of glass set high in the wall, close to the ceiling, and the light that came through it was different from the light in the front. It was cooler. It was the light from the north side of the building, or the east side, the side that didn't get the afternoon sun. And it came through the glass in a thin, pale shaft that fell across the top shelves and made the dust there glow silver instead of gold. And the two kinds of light, the warm gold from the front and the cool silver from the back, met somewhere in the middle of the store and blended into something that was neither one nor the other. A light that was just light, soft and even and without a name. And in that light, in that middle space where the gold faded and the silver hadn't quite arrived, the man would move. I would watch him from the front of the store, from just inside the screen door or just outside it, and he would walk from the counter to the back shelves and return with something in his hands. A can, a box, a small paper bag of something. And the whole journey, front to back and back again, was slow, unhurried. His footsteps making their familiar sounds on the boards, his apron swaying gently with each step, the things in his pocket clinking softly, and the store would hold him as he moved through it the way a river holds a boat, without effort, without resistance, just carrying him along in its own slow current. And sometimes he would stop. Halfway back, or 3/4 of the way, he would stop and stand in front of a shelf and just look at it, not searching for something, not reaching for anything, just looking. The way you look at a garden or a bookshelf or anything you've tended for a long time, not seeing what's there so much as feeling it, knowing it, the way you know the rooms of your own house in the dark, by feel, by memory, by the accumulated weight of all the times you've been there before. And in that moment, standing still in the middle of his store with the gold light behind him and the silver light ahead and the clock ticking on the wall and the dust drifting and the smell of everything rising around him like warm water, he was part of the store and the store was part of him. And there was no difference between the two. And the afternoon held them both, gently, completely. The way sleep holds you when it finally comes, not grabbing, not pulling, just receiving you, just letting you rest. I think that's a good place to rest for a moment. Right there, in the middle of the store, in the middle of the afternoon, in the middle of the light. The clock ticks, the dust drifts, the twine hangs still from its spool. The man stands among his shelves, and the shelves stand around him, and the air is warm, and the air is cool, and the whole place breathes slowly, in and out, the way you're breathing right now, the way the night breathes around this building and around yours. We'll come back. We'll go deeper into those shelves. We'll find what's been sitting in the back waiting. But not yet. Not just yet. For now, the store is still, and so are we. Still here. 2:15, maybe closer to 2:30, and the night has reached that place it reaches when there's nothing left to settle. Everything that was going to get quiet has gotten quiet. Everything that was going to stop moving has stopped. The building is still. The street is still. Even the air in this studio feels like it's decided to just stay where it is for a while, not going anywhere, not doing anything, just resting in the space between the walls, the way air rests in a jar when you close the lid. And I'm still thinking about that store. I've been thinking about it for a while now. And the thing about a memory like this, the thing about a place that lives this far back in your mind, is that the longer you sit with it, the more it gives you. It's like turning a stone over in your hand. You think you've seen every side of it, and then the light shifts, or your thumb finds a new groove, and there's something else there, something you hadn't noticed, something that was waiting for you to slow down enough to find it. So let's go back. One more time. Let's go back to that store in the afternoon. And this time, let's just wander. No direction, no destination. Just the way you'd wander through a place you loved when you were small, touching things, smelling things, letting your eyes go where they wanted to go. The shelves along the side wall. I don't think I've taken you there yet. The counter ran across the middle, and the deep shelves went to the back. But along the side wall, the wall that faced the street, the wall with the windows, there was another set of shelves, lower than the ones in the back, waist high, and these were the shelves where the everyday things lived. The things people came in for without having to think about it, the things they reached for, the way you reach for a glass of water, out of habit, out of need, out of the simple rhythm of a life that requires certain things and knows where to find them. Soap. There was soap on those shelves. I mentioned it before, the bar soap near the register. But there was more here. Bars of soap in paper wrappers, stacked in rows, and the wrappers were white or pale blue, or sometimes a faded rose color. And the printing on them was simple. The name of the soap, a small oval design, nothing more. And the paper had gone soft at the edges from being handled, from being picked up and looked at and set back down, and each bar had a weight to it that was satisfying in the hand, a dense, cool, solid weight, the weight of something that knew exactly what it was and what it was for. And the smell of that soap came through the paper. Not strongly, not the way a perfume comes at you across a room. It came gently, the way a thought comes to you when you're almost asleep, just arriving, just presenting itself, not insisting. A clean smell, a plain smell. The smell of lye and tallow and whatever small fragrance had been added. Lavender, maybe, or something close to lavender. Something that grew in a field and was dried and crushed and mixed into the soap and was now barely there, barely a whisper of what it had been, but enough. Enough to make you think of clean sheets on a line. Enough to make you think of a kitchen after the dishes were done. Enough to make you think of hands that had just been washed, cool and damp, and smelling of nothing but themselves, and the faintest memory of that soap. Next to the soap, or near it, things were near each other in that store. Not organized in any way a modern person would understand. Not categorized, not labeled by aisle, just placed where they'd been placed for years. One thing next to another because that's where they'd ended up, and no one saw any reason to move them. There were candles. Plain white candles. The kind people kept in a kitchen drawer for when the power went out. And they stood in their box like a row of pale sentries, and they smelled like wax, like warm wax, even though they had never been lit, even though the heat of the afternoon sun through the window was the only warmth they had ever known. And that warmth was enough to release the faintest trace of their scent into the air. A smell that was almost not a smell at all. Just the suggestion of one, the promise of one, the way a match before it struck has the ghost of sulfur in it, waiting. And there was kerosene. Not on the shelf, in a can, a metal can with a spout, sitting on the floor near the side wall. And the can was red, or had been red, and the paint was chipped in places showing the bare metal beneath. And the metal had rusted in those bare places, to a color that matched the rust on the barrel bands out on the porch, that same nameless orange-brown. And the cap of the spout was slightly loose, always slightly loose. And through that looseness came the smell. Kerosene. Sharp and sweet and unmistakable. A smell that cut through every other smell in the store, the way a bell cuts through silence. Not loudly, not harshly, but clearly, distinctly. A smell you could identify from across the room with your eyes closed. And it was not an unpleasant smell. Not to a boy. not in that time, in that place. It was the smell of lamps being lit at dusk, the smell of a barn on a cold night, the smell of a world that still ran in part on fire in glass, on flame in a wick, on the slow burning of oil in a dark room, pushing the dark back just enough to see by, just enough to read by, just enough to find your way to bed. And there were other things along those shelves and on the floor nearby and hanging from nails on the wall. Things that had no particular order, but that together made up the vocabulary of a life lived in a small town in those years. Buckets, tin buckets with wire handles that clanked softly against each other when you brushed past them. Brooms, straw brooms standing in the corner with their handles leaning against the wall at the same angle. A family of brooms, each one slightly different in the way the straw had worn. The bristles longer on one side than the other from the particular habit of whoever had last used it. Rope. A coil of rope hanging from a nail, thick and rough and the colour of sand, and the fibres of it caught the light and held it, each fibre a tiny line of gold, and the whole coil had a dry, earthy smell that was the smell of fields and fences and the work that holds a small place together. And seed packets. I almost forgot the seed packets. There was a wooden rack near the window that faced the street, and it held seed packets arranged in rows, dozens of them, each one with a picture on the front, a painting of the flower or vegetable the seeds would become, and those paintings were bright and hopeful in a way that nothing else in the store was bright, because they were selling a future, they were selling a possibility. A picture of something that didn't exist yet, but could, if you took the seeds home and put them in the ground and gave them water and time and patience. Marigolds and zinnias and tomatoes and pole beans and sweet corn and sunflowers. The paintings showed them at their best, at their fullest, at the peak of what they could be. Fat red tomatoes on green vines, sunflowers taller than a child, marigolds the colour of the afternoon light itself. And the packets were thin and light in your hand, almost weightless, and if you held one close to your ear and shook it gently, you could hear the seeds inside, a dry, whispering rattle, the sound of something small and dormant and alive waiting. And the paper of those packets. The paper was smooth and slightly glossy, the kind of paper that feels cool against your fingertips, and the edges were sharp where they'd been cut, and on the back, in small print, there were instructions. How deep to plant, how far apart, how many days to germination. And those instructions were written in a language that assumed you had soil and sunlight and time, that assumed the world would go on turning and the seasons would go on changing and the rain would come when the rain was supposed to come. And there was something deeply comforting in that assumption, in that quiet confidence that the future was a place where things would grow if you gave them what they needed. Everything in that store was waiting for something. The candles were waiting to be lit. The rope was waiting to be uncoiled. The seeds were waiting to be planted. And the store itself was waiting, in its patient, unhurried way for whatever the afternoon would bring, which was usually not much, which was usually just more afternoon, more light, more quiet. More of the same slow breathing that had been going on since morning and would go on until evening came. And the man in the apron turned the sign in the window and pulled the shade, and the store went dark and rested until morning came again. The window. Let me look out the window for a moment. The window that faced the street, the one with the seed packets near it and the low shelves beside it. Through that window, from inside the store, the street looked different than it looked from the sidewalk. From inside, the street was framed. It was a picture in a window frame, a picture of a small town on a summer afternoon. And the glass softened everything. The edges of the buildings across the way, the line of the curb, the shape of a tree that stood on the far sidewalk, an elm or a maple, I can't be sure. But it was tall and full, and its leaves moved in whatever small breeze was passing through, and the shadow of that tree lay across the street in a pattern that shifted and resettled and shifted again. A living shadow, a breathing shadow, the only thing out there that was moving. and the street itself was empty, or nearly empty. A car might pass, slowly, the way cars passed through small towns, not rushing, not trying to get anywhere quickly, just moving through. The engine a low hum that rose and faded and was gone. And then the street was empty again, and the quiet came back, and the shadow of the tree kept moving, and the light kept pouring in through the window and filling the store with gold. From inside, with the light coming through that glass, you could see the imperfections in the window. Small bubbles in the old glass, tiny distortions that made the world outside waver slightly if you moved your head, as if the street were underwater, as if the buildings and the tree and the sky were all seen through a thin, clear stream, and the wavering was gentle and slow, and it made the world outside feel farther away than it was, separated from the inside of the store by more than just glass, separated by something you couldn't name but could feel. A boundary between the warm, still, scented world of the store and the open, bright, wind-touched world of the street. And you could be on either side, but you could not be on both at once. And the store, from the inside, felt like a place that had chosen its side a long time ago and was content with the choice. And the afternoon was shifting. That's the thing about afternoons, they shift. Not suddenly, never suddenly, but the light changes, degree by degree, the angle steepening, the gold going deeper, going richer, the shadows getting longer. And in the store, you could feel it happening, even if you couldn't see the clock, even if you didn't look at the hands on the white face on the wall. You could feel it in the way the rectangles of light on the floor had moved, had traveled from where they'd been when you first arrived, had stretched and thinned and gone from bright gold to a deeper amber, the color of honey held up to the light, the color of old varnish, the color of something that is warm but knows it will not be warm forever. And the store responded. Not in any way you could point to, not in any way that announced itself, but the store responded to the changing light, the way a garden responds to evening, slowly, gently, everything easing a degree further into itself. The jars on the shelves caught the deeper light and glowed more warmly. The wood of the counter darkened a shade. The dust in the air, the golden dust that had been drifting all afternoon, seemed to slow even further, each mote taking even longer to find its way down, as if the air itself were thickening, settling, preparing for the long, slow exhale of evening. And the man behind the counter would feel it too. You could see it in the way he moved, a degree slower, a degree more settled, his hands still busy but quieter about it, his footsteps on the boards a shade softer. And there was a moment, there was always a moment, sometime around 4 o'clock, maybe a little after, when the store reached a kind of fullness, a kind of completion, as if the whole afternoon had been building toward this one still point, this one moment, when the light and the air and the smell and the sound all came into balance and held, just held, the way a note holds at the end of a song, not fading yet, not letting go, just being there, full and round and exactly itself. And at that moment, if you were standing in that store, if you were anywhere in that store, near the window or at the counter or in the back among the dim shelves or on the porch looking in through the screen, you could feel something that I don't have a word for. It was not happiness exactly, though it was close. It was not peace exactly, though it was closer. It was the feeling of being inside a place that was complete. A place that had everything it needed. A place that was not trying to be anything other than what it was, and what it was on that afternoon in that light was enough, was more than enough, was everything. The screen door, one last time, somebody goes out. The creak, long and rising, the note the door always plays, the pause, the clap, soft, wooden, final. The rattle, brief and then still. And the door rests again, almost closed, not quite, that thin line of air between the frame and the edge. And through that gap, the world outside breathes in, and the world inside breathes out. And the two mix for a moment in the space between. Warm and cool, bright and dim, open and enclosed, and then they separate, and the store is the store again, and the street is the street, And the afternoon goes on being the afternoon, which is all it was ever trying to do. The light in the store is deeper now. The gold has gone to amber, and the amber is thinking about going to something else, something darker, something that doesn't have a name yet, because it hasn't arrived. It's still on its way, still easing in from the edges, the way sleep eases in from the edges of your mind. Not arriving all at once, but coming slowly, one shade at a time, 1 degree at a time, until you realize it's been there for a while. It's been settling around you for longer than you knew. And you didn't notice because it came so gently, so quietly, so much like itself that there was nothing to notice, nothing to startle you, nothing to do but let it come. And the clock ticks. The clock has been ticking this whole time, all through this long afternoon, measuring out the hours in its steady, patient way. And I've been here this whole time in this studio, in this chair, behind this microphone. And the city outside is dark, and the night is deep, and the transmitter is humming, and the record I should have played an hour ago is still sitting on the shelf. And I don't think I'll play it now. I think the quiet is better. I think the quiet is enough. The store is closing, in my memory. Not shutting down, not locking up, just easing toward it. The man in the apron is moving a little slower. The light through the windows is a little less. The candy case still glows, but softer now. The colour's muted, the red's gone to rose, the yellow's gone to cream, and the waxed paper in the compartments has gone from translucent to opaque, losing its light, the way a pond loses its light when a cloud passes over, not going dark, just going quiet, going inward, holding whatever warmth it still has a little closer, a little tighter. And the smell is still there. The smell will always be there. The wood and the grain and the soap and the kerosene and the candle wax and the brown paper and the twine and the penny candy and the dust and the cardboard and the old floorboards and the cool air from the back and the warm air from the front, and all of it together. One smell now. One single thing made of 100 things. And it is the smell of a place that was real, that stood on a real street in a real town, that had a real man behind a real counter, and that is gone now. Gone the way all such places are gone, not destroyed, not erased, just finished, just done with their particular kind of being. Moved on to whatever comes after a general store on a main street, in a small town in the middle of the country, in the middle of the century. But not gone from here. Not gone from this room, this studio, this late hour. Not gone from wherever you are right now. Lying in the dark, listening or half listening or not listening at all, already drifting, already on your way to wherever sleep takes you, which is a place I can't follow, but which I like to think is warm and dim and quiet and smells like old wood and has a clock somewhere ticking, holding the hours, keeping them safe. The store is still there. In the back of your mind, in the back of mine. The sign creaks on its chains. The screen door rests. The dust drifts in the last of the light. The man stands behind his counter, his hands finally still, and the apron hangs straight. And the twine hangs straight. And the whole place breathes out one long, slow breath and settles into the evening the way you're settling now, the way I'm settling, the way the night settles over everything and holds it all. The store, the street, the town, the memory, you, me, all of it. Holds it all gently and asks for nothing, and gives us the dark, and gives us the quiet, and gives us rest. That's all for tonight. That's all for this one. The store is closed, and the street is dark, and the town is asleep, and the only sound is the sound of the night doing what the night does, which is to wait for the morning that always comes, but not yet. Not for a long time yet. Sleep well. I'll be here.